Read my lips. No new matches.
My fellow Americans,
facts don't care about your feelings.
And then we're going to Washington, D.C. to take back the White House!
You're a lying dog-faced pony soldier.
they got the freaking guts. Because they saw someone who wasn't bullshitting them.
I know the human being and fish can coexist peacefully.
You are fake news. Did you know I never used a prepared speech?
It fooled me, we can't get fooled again.
Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Argument of the Month. This is the November Argument of the Month meeting, and tonight's topic is Stop Judging Historical Figures by Today's Standards. We have we have two sides to our debate. I will be your moderator, standing in for our regular moderator of Ben Kelly. On the side who is opposed to judging historical figures by the standards of today, we have Boone Greenlee from Forest Lake. He will say anything to win this debate.
Wow!
As well as Ben Rickey, who is known for charging recklessly into battle as Reinhardt, his ability to throw a spear, and to spew random facts about things you don't care about. In his words, it is for these skills he is with us tonight, to shatter, spear, and spew on us some of that good old-fashioned knowledge.
Beautiful.
For the side that believes we should judge historical figures by the moral standards of today, we have Mike. Mike is a two-time Argument of the Month reigning champion who's currently defending his title. We also have Blake Rustad, who is an amateur historian but professional judger. He's confident that you will judge him the victor in this historic debate.
You're so funny.
Okay, so I would like to invite everyone who's listening in tonight to follow the link in the Argument of the Month Discord channel to the voting section. This will be our pre-vote poll, and we will take a poll at the end of the debate to determine which side won. So please follow that link and select which side you are presently on before listening to the debate. And then we'll post another link towards the end. At this point, I think we can move into opening statements. Would you like to start, Boone?
And
Ben?
I will start. So, to begin, we should really stop judging historical figures by today's standards for a number of reasons. The first point I would like to start out is every good person, even today, has made mistakes, and on top of that, they may be judged as a bad person given historical context later on in history. An example of this is currently there's a trend for veganism, and maybe in 100 years, everyone will be vegan, and they'll judge people now, meat eaters, as being just these disgusting human beings. It sounds silly, right, to think that that could possibly be happen, but maybe Barack Obama will be judged as a horrible person because he was a meat eater and he, slaughtered all of these terrible animals. Maybe Ronald Reagan will be judged as a terrible human being because he had a cattle ranch and he enslaved and slaughtered all these terrible animals. And these are just not the standards of that time, of our current day and age, but maybe that will be what it will be like in the future. And that's just not a standard or a proper judging metric for that time. If we want to go back to current or more recent historical figures, we could pinpoint a number of bad things about them. And like Martin Luther King, for example, had committed adultery and had numerous affairs. But we shouldn't really judge him necessarily by that, but by the good things that he did do during his times. He led a major and huge civil rights movement and should be admired and for those things and judged positively for those. Lyndon B Johnson constantly called black people by the N-word, but he was the person who signed that civil rights legislation into act. And right now we can't just dismiss him for all his good that he did for the civil rights movement just because he used the N-word, because that was the way people talked back then. And we can't judge him for those things. I mean, we could go on and on. Walt Disney was a known racist, but he was amazing for his storytelling ability. John Lennon was a huge homophobic, but we should admire him for his musical talent. It's good to view the good that these people do, to talk about the bad that they do, but to still admire them for the courage that they did during their times. Heroes, if we talk about, if we judge harshly historical figures by the past, we'll ultimately lose these heroes that we have. Christopher Columbus, for example, he has completely lost his credentials as being, a valuable and admired person, but he was the person, and because
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Boone Greenlee?
Oh, is it me? You
All right,
do it?
It goes.
Alternate.
You want to alternate? Sure. Blake Rustad, 2 minutes.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. So myself and Michael are in opposition of the motion that is to stop judging historical figures by today's standards. I say you certainly can judge them by today's standards. Judge away. So what is the definition of judge? It is to form an opinion through careful weighing of evidence. Every day we live our lives, we're gathering new evidence. It is just a part of maturing, a part of growing, a part of progressing. And if you cannot take that evidence and apply it to the past, then how do you expect to rightfully grow as a society? Now, I understand that some of these people have done great, wonderful things that we can be proud about and still admire, but that does not make them good people. If someone owned slaves, and at the time there was a movement against slavery, and people knew it was bad, but hey, we make a lot of money, it's cheap, I kind of like this slavery thing. That means that person knew that it was not a good thing, and they chose to do it anyway. It's selfish, it's wrong, and I am happy to be one to say that I can judge that person for what they did. So blameworthiness is the topic of, could the person have known any different? And I think that is what matters. Many people can look around at the world and say, do I know any different? Yes. Ben brought up veganism. Do we like to eat animals? Yes. Do we think it is wrong? We do, and we probably will be on the wrong side of history. And I think it is fair that we will be judged one day for eating animals. Thank you.
Alrighty. Thank you very much, Mr. Rustad. Boone Greenlee, would you like to present your opening argument?
Yeah, my problem with it isn't inherently just the shallow judgment of it. It's that I believe it leads to the ultimate erasal of the story of the people, so that in a generation or 2 or 3, they just won't even be talked about. They just won't be anything that our children or grandchildren will even know about. Because I think that's just the pattern that I see. That's my ultimate problem with it. It's getting rid of these heroes. It's getting rid of these people to admire. Even if it's rose-colored, right? It's just like, it's looking up to something that seems great.
and greater than ourselves, which I think is an important part of society. I even think it erases enough of the story that it will ultimately let us repeat historical mistakes by this erasal that it concerns me the most. It's not intentional. Nobody means to erase them. It's not a censorship. It's just what people do. They slander them to the point where they're just disliked, to the point where nobody really wants to talk about them anymore. They're not going to be in our history books, not in our schools, maybe in some fringe, weird source on the internet that isn't really widespread. You'll have to find out about these people, which ultimately means they're forgotten. I even would like to say about people knowing if something is right or wrong. Like, I don't know if veganism is right or wrong. I would say those animals that we're eating, the alternative we can offer these animals is oblivion if we don't eat them. Chickens are not going to be in the wild. Cattle are not going to be in the wild. I think that's just a debate that I probably will be on the wrong side of history, but did I know any better? Doesn't matter. I'll be gone.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Boone Greenlee. Excellent opening argument so far. Mike Heidelberger, you have the last opening statement. You may begin when ready.
Yeah, I just wanted to start this debate by saying that, I think all sides agree that we want to not erase history, but highlight and just make aware and more knowledge that of things that were right or wrong in our past and what people did. One of these things that I want to bring up is this latest with Lake Calhoun. Prime example is right or wrong. I think it's silly that we're changing lake names, but I had no idea Calhoun did all those awful things during his time, and because of the conversation or of us changing the lake name, I am now aware of it, and I think by judging figures and changing names of things, if you like it or not, it does bring knowledge to the subjects of past wrongs, and I think that is good for our society as we keep growing, and so that's why I think it's good that we judge those in the past, and I feel like it's not erasing history, but we're even highlighting. I feel like the other side, we kind of just blow past what wrongs there were, and most of the time people don't even know about it, and I would argue that that's more erasing of our history is when we don't teach and talk about those things that have happened, and that's all I want to say about it.
Alrighty. Thank you very much, Mr. Heidelberger. This section, we've completed our opening statements, so we'll now move into more of a free-form discussion for about 10 to 15 minutes. And there'll be minimal moderator interaction. If people get off topic, then I'll try to steer the conversation back. But for the most part, you guys will be free to talk about whatever you want. So I think I would like to start the discussion with the side that is for judging historical figures by the standards of today. Mike and Blake, you may begin. However, the Boone and Ben, you are free to respond as you please.
Okay, well, so I'd like to start with a historical figure that has been judged quite harshly by today's and the past standards, and that's Hitler. So Hitler is a character that obviously we all know did very, very bad things. Today's standards, at the time, those standards. But what's interesting is how Germany has taken their past and they don't just brush it aside and say, this is not us, this isn't what we did. They literally have made it a part of their culture from childhood to know what they did. They literally take their kid's face and rub it in and say, this is what happened, this is what we need to learn from. And this is what I want you to think about as you become adults and mature and as you get better as people. I just think that's a really fascinating way to look back at the past and focus on, it's almost focusing on the negative, the worst things of your past and using that to learn from.
I love that you brought that up because I have a different opinion of that, and that is not just the Germans, but especially the Germans and Americans as well. We squarely put all of the blame on Hitler, which is very inaccurate and actually probably will allow us to repeat some of those terrible mistakes. Because the Germans don't like to admit kind of the awful truth that the German citizens have a lot to do with that. They're just scapegoating it all on one man, and that is how it can happen again.
Don't you think that's why they teach it, though? Because that was a part of the post-World War II revelation, was how many Germans realized what they did was wrong. And there's so much shame. There's so much shame in that country. Like, you can't even make jokes about Hitler and Nazis to German people. They don't think it's funny. They don't want to hear those jokes. And it's not that they only blame Hitler. They're like, that will never happen to us again. We will not let that happen. And making jokes about Hitler is not even okay for them.
I think Hitler in general is not exactly, like, we're not for the pro-admiring Hitler stance in any sort of way, fashion, or form. And I do admire the German culture for trying to, just bring that to the historical discussion, absolutely. I think it's more so I'm focusing on heroes. Now, Hitler is not viewed in any sort of way as a hero. Maybe at the time, but when the Nazi Empire was falling, the people were like, "Yep, we're done with that," and it was sort of in that time they're like, "Yeah, that was not a great decision for us." I think what is a much better sort of example of this would be somebody like George Washington, for example, constantly renowned hero of our time, and sort of a monumental, legendary figure of the U.S. population. And yes, he owned slaves. It's a terrible thing. We talk about it, right? We could say that. My point more so is that we should admire George Washington for the changes that he did do during his time. Slavery was a topic that was very untouchable, and they did touch on it during the Revolution, and it was because of George Washington's example and heroism of saying, I will stand up, I will lead our nation's army, I will become president, so that the common man can vote, can have freedom. And that ultimately led to the framework of opening the discussion up as, should slavery be allowed? This was a huge topic during the Constitutional Convention. It was almost passed, and we put things in the Constitution saying, we're going to ban the importation of slaves. It set up a number of other things too to start that discussion later on, so that when Abraham Lincoln became president, it was a huge discussion in the American population, and that wouldn't be a case if I believe if George Washington hadn't stepped up and hadn't broken those chains of nobility and kings being the people who do things, instead the common person. So the common fighting that fight first is what led to the freedom of slavery and the rights for black people to vote and the rights for women to vote, because it opens up the discussion. It leads these chain of events to happen. And that's what we should admire George Washington for, because he was revolutionary for his time. He wasn't able to fight that slavery fight at that time, because really each man and woman is only able to fight so much during their own historical time.
Can I ask a question to Blake, or did you want to?
No, go ahead.
So in your opening statement, Blake, I felt like you kind of left the door open for, if somebody knew better, they should be judged. But if they didn't know any better, they do get more of a free pass?
I think, more of a free pass, absolutely. Yeah, I think if you're a social pioneer, and you're the first one, even though you're backwards, I mean, you can admire that. But there are a lot of cases of popular heroic figures being slave owners and say, well, they had slaves, but everybody had slaves, but no, that not everybody had slaves. There's like a whole movement of suffrage or rights for black people, rights for slaves. Ignoring that movement when it's happening, to me, is what is judge-worthy.
Do you like Dwight Eisenhower? Do you know a lot about Dwight Eisenhower or anything?
I know some about him, yeah.
You like him? He has a speech about the military-industrial complex.
Yeah, I'm a fan of
really
him.
Anti-war in his presidency, I think.
Yes, yep.
Are you aware that after World War II, he starved 1 million Germans to death?
No, I wasn't aware of that. So that would be a good thing to bring up. Which
is he a good man or a bad man?
I don't. If it's you said after the war.
After the war,
1 million.
He starved 1 million German soldiers to death in camps.
I think he's a bad man
Sure,
for that.
He's a bad man.
And that's why I love this topic.
They're prisoners of war.
Let's judge them up like crazy.
Yeah.
So
he won't make the top 10 best president list.
Yeah, I did not know that.
I think he's a more interesting topic because I want to say in World War II era, things were so different. We're talking about tens of millions of people and targeting civilian cities of just our own government even, right? Of across the board. It was such a crazy time.
Sure.
That we can hardly imagine like the stakes there. So I don't think
it's the same conversation of Americans being mad at Muslims or judging being scared of Muslims after 9/11. Even when I was a kid, I thought it was silly how much people were judging Muslims. And so now I still judge people then for, mistreating Muslims, and they look back now and I double down on that. Like, that's why I think George Bush is an awful president.
I think by those same standards, then you could say everybody involved in World War II was a terrible person.
That's what I'm saying.
Because you could be
Who's not terrible in World War II?
They killed millions of people. Winston Churchill killed millions of people. FDR killed millions of people.
No, we fought a just war.
They brought us into a war.
That was a just war. We fought just war.
Oh, historical context matters. A war matters.
I've never once said wars are not ever fightable. I think wars can be justified, and World War II is a fantastic war to fight. I'm glad we fought that war. Now, if there were...
But he killed millions of people.
I'm not aware of this fact. If there were 1 million innocent people who were essentially murdered post-war, then hell yeah, you should judge that.
Yeah.
I would absolutely judge that as being a crime against humanity.
Yeah, his argument, I guess, was... His language, I believe, was he couldn't deprogram them. So German soldiers were frequently highly meth addicted, and he didn't really understand that. He just thought it was this programming. He felt he couldn't integrate them into any society. He didn't know what else to do. He's captured these prisoners of war. He's like, I can't release you back into your own country. You'll destroy it.
Yeah,
he thought he was doing a sympathetic thing.
I think that's awful.
He didn't understand what meth addiction was.
So we've seen... There's the Geneva Convention, obviously, how prisoners should be treated in times of war, which was after World War II.
Mm-hmm. Actually, it was World War I.
World War I. Yeah, right. So that was in place.
Yeah.
World War II. Mm-hmm. I'm sure a fair number of us have seen how the Japanese treated American prisoners of war, and it's awful. Like it's some of the worst torture you can imagine, and same with the Germans, what they did out there too. So many did it, and I know it's a time of war, but if people did, it's just like just what you brought up with the German citizens. They accepted what their country, what Hitler was doing, and they were judged by it. Like a lot of people got some pretty bad consequences after World War II.
So let's pivot this a little differently. Let's talk about abortion right now. You mentioned that if the slavery argument is out in the open and people are discussing it, right? Abortion is, a lot of people equivalent it to the slavery argument. It's in a current debate and discussion. Let's say it gets outlawed in 50 years, 100 years, or whatever. Are we gonna say? Are we okay with saying yes? Obama was a terrible U.S. president for allowing abortion to become legal and not doing more to fight it. These are the sort of questions we have to ask ourselves, right? Now, personally, by my own moral standards, right, I would say yes, he did a lot to be for pro-abortion, right? But during his time, it was a very controversial subject, of which was not part of the popular consent, right? And according to these historical standards, if that becomes the new law, he was a terrible human being for allowing millions of American lives to be killed. How do you feel about judging Obama by the amount of abortions he allowed during his 8 years of presidency?
I think our opinion's irrelevant because we're living through it, but I'm okay with future generations judging our generations for anything that they deem inappropriate or... Because, it's just all about aggression.
Right.
Yeah, it's another...
So let's take it...
To me, it's another thing that none of us like abortion.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us are okay with it.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us aren't. Nobody's a fan of it. Nobody wants it to happen, but they understand the necessary evil that it can be. Some do, some don't.
Mm-hmm.
Now, could you say, like, if you go forward 100 years, maybe societies will say, why the fuck didn't they put more resources into preventing pregnancies and that? And religion aside, why didn't they do better birth control and make that a...
And you think that judgment's fair? Because we're kind of doing the best we can, right?
Are we? So if I mean we're a pretty damn smart society and we've got some pretty poor birth control methods.
Yeah.
Like I could say, yeah, maybe you're right if this is such a hot topic of, I mean, it's life and death, really, and people not taking that seriously. Like there's Plan B, there's the pill, there's condoms, but we could do better, but we don't. So if there's a society that is now they're not.
So now you're like the German citizen who like kind of just knew there was a problem, but just kind of turned.
So let's take it to another extreme. Let's say in 100 years we say eugenics is okay, and we're allowed to like kill anybody so long because it will make the human race better, and that's the new moral standard of the time. And they're now allowed to judge people because we didn't do enough eugenics back in 2020. Like we really should have killed more people.
Are you talking about the future?
Yeah, the future.
I don't like that's too much hypothetical.
Well, that's what we're
all right. Let's go back to. Do you think your grandchildren are going to know about the good that Eisenhower did, or do you think once more people realize what I said, then like Eisenhower just kind of goes away?
I really hope they know.
I think we can agree. We hope that, but I don't see that happening. I see the erasal.
That's the problem I see with like not doing the things that society is doing right now, where we're not to have social justice warriors, but like the Calhoun situation.
Yeah, your grandchildren will not know Calhoun. They won't know anything about Calhoun. Your grandchildren will not know anything about Calhoun.
Yeah, but would they have known it if it would have stayed the same? No.
So
but like at least now I can at least there's a chance.
There's a chance.
But before there wasn't.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Calhoun was like a slave owner who was absolutely for slavery. Shouldn't be. We shouldn't have named. The only reason it was named after anybody was somebody was brown nosing the Department of Natural Resources.
Our side
was brown nosing. No, my general point is about like people like George Washington. We should admire them for the courageous battles they did fight for. Calhoun only fought for slavery. That was what his big fight was for. We shouldn't be admiring that at all. Yeah. George Washington was not fighting for slavery.
So do you agree that it's okay that we change the lake name?
I'm perfectly okay with that. My point is people like George Washington.
What about you?
What about Boone?
I'd rather keep the lake name the same, but I do like talking about it.
Why are you just like having the same?
Because I think it'll just erase it. I think it's nice that we're having to face embarrassment. That's like, wow, look at this. I think that's great. But I think we're covering that up. That's what I think the renaming the lake is. In a generation or two, we've swept our embarrassment under the rug. That's my problem with renaming the lake.
Yeah.
My point is like, are you for like erasing all the heroism that George Washington did? Like,
no,
he was a terrible person because he owned slaves. Like,
no,
he did a lot for this country, and that's what we should admire him for. And that's what's on the table.
Yeah. So
George Washington's on the chopping block.
Yes,
Thomas Jefferson's on the chopping block. Benjamin Franklin's on the chopping block. Like all these national heroes.
So Calhoun will disappear just like Eisenhower, Franklin, Washington. They're just going to go away. They're going to cease to exist in our history.
I think, to Mike's point, I think it's like the book Speaker for the Dead. When someone dies, all you hear is this person was so nice. This person was the best person on the planet. It's not genuine. Genuine is when you know both sides. And
we're not for saying let's not talk about that George Washington was a slave owner. Like, let's talk about that. I'm all for talking about that.
Here's where I disagree with you, Blake. When I said, do you think Eisenhower's a bad man? And you said yes, I say no. I think he's a good man. He regrets even what he did. He fought really hard to prevent war, and I think he did a lot of good things to do that. World War II was a terrible thing.
The historical context
It's
is
almost
that
a good thing when people disagree about historical figures compared to all agreeing that somebody's good, because I feel like it's talked about more.
Yeah, so what I mean is, I didn't say don't talk about them. What I mean is, when I say don't judge, I don't mean just judge them poorly by today's standards. Like, World War II is a different era than today. It is so different. If a modern day president starved 1 million people, it would be different because we don't have anything like World War II to compare to. That is my point.
I don't think Eisenhower's on the chopping block. It's George Washington.
Blake just chopped them. Blake just chopped them.
Well, I mean,
I said that was bad. I said killing 1 million
context.
innocent people is bad. I didn't say Dwight Eisenhower is bad. I said that was bad. Now,
This is recorded, by the way.
I don't want to chop him. I didn't say.
I think he said Eisenhower was bad because
I said if that was true, then yes, that was bad.
Viewers, you can rewind when you listen to the podcast.
Okay, whatever. Maybe I don't care. It doesn't.
Blake, you have the last word before we move to the next segment.
Okay, so now Eisenhower did good and interesting things, but he did bad things. Now this is something I just learned right now, and that's fantastic. And I'm happy to judge based on that for today's standards, because I can look back and say, you know what? If I had a president today that was fighting a terrible war, and we won, and he started killing off millions of people, hell yeah, I would be up in arms and say, all right, you did all right before, but better knock this shit off. Because I can look back at Eisenhower and say, you did all right, but then you fucked it up at the end.
Thank you very much, everyone. That was an excellent round of open discussion. A lot of interesting perspectives. Spirited debate. That's what we're all about here. At this point, I would like to invite all of our listeners and audience members to post questions they do have for the debaters in the Discord chat channel. We want to see questions from as many people as we possibly can. While you're doing that, I have a question for all of you, which is, it starts with the concept that history is written by the victors in any situation. How do you feel that concept, whether it be accurate or not, plays into your positions on this topic? Ben Rippey, go ahead. This will be, again, this is not a timed response. However, I would like everyone to be able to respond to these questions.
Yeah, I actually thought about that question earlier. I'm so glad you brought it up, Derek. I was thinking about this in the context of George Washington and how much the times and sort of the victors really reflect on how we judge somebody. So somebody like George Washington, because of his times, because of that historical context, should be judged well because he did found a new nation. Now, if you were to take him out of that historical context, you'd be like, yeah, he killed tens of thousands of British lives and of American lives, all for the sake of, some like ideal. You'd be like, wow, he's a terrible person. But due to the fact that he established a new nation, right, in that historical context, and that, and the fact that it's written by the victors, right, means, wow, he did such great things for our new nations because he ultimately won the freedom for the common man and allowed the common person to vote and to have freedom and to move, which ultimately, established the framework to remove slavery from the modern world, right? But however, if he would have lost, he would have been labeled as a terrible person, if we were to take it out of that historical context, because he was a treasonous person, a traitor, right? And he would have been judged harshly, right, for those things, being responsible for tens of thousands of British lives, right? And that's why that historical context matters so much. And that's the same thing with like the slavery, the fact that he owned slavery. Like during those times, like slavery wasn't even an issue anybody could even touch at the time. But what could we touch? we could touch that the common person should have the right to vote and freedom and to be involved in their political government. And that's the fight he chose to fight. And later on, his predecessors who wanted to live in his vision were able and willing to fight for the freedom of every man, woman, and child, including black people and eventually women as well. And I truly believe he set the framework for that. And that's why we should judge according to that historical context.
Mr. Heidelberger, you look like you have some thoughts.
You got a motion.
No, I just going from what Derek had asked. I think it always scares me when the victor gets to put whatever they want in the history books. I've never liked that. I don't like when we do it in our own civics classes, like what we did to the Indians. Prime example, like in the history books, it doesn't sound that bad what we did, but like it was awful things that we did, and it's we don't even teach that. We don't even teach that to our kids. I mean, we do, but like not as much as we should. I mean, like I hardly knew anything about it. Like
outside of school, you learn it.
Yeah, outside of school, you learn more than you do in school, and that's a prime example Derek's talking about. The
Sounds like a North Branch education to me.
yeah, maybe. But Rush City too. So.
Yeah, I hate to do this to you, but I really agree a lot with what Mike is saying. I want accurate.
Yeah.
I want an accurate historical account. I'm not for putting this rose-colored thing all the time and like just a one-sided only good. I want the bad to be taught, but I want people to. I always try to apply some context to it. It's as if like, oh, what an idiot, that guy didn't know how to read before the printing press, or what a violent brute before there was law enforcement, right? Like that's the problem. Like you have to remember the context. You're in a time when you don't have 911 to call, you don't have police to help you, so you had to be extra violent. So when you hear of the violent acts somebody did before law enforcement existed, don't judge them the same way, or don't judge them for being so ignorant before they had even education, you know.
To like jump off that, piggyback off that point too, like capital punishment nowadays is I think completely brutal. There's no reason to do it. But given historical context, when our prison system was just crappy, like capital punishment was like the way you prevented more deaths from happening. And that's an important context, is that times in which it happened in, and we can't just ignore the times that like legislation and governments happen in.
I think that was just a knee-jerk reaction for like those public executions and everything. I think that was just to help the masses to actually prevent crimes now. I think they knew that too.
Well, I will say, generally speaking, that we have historically overused capital punishment, definitely far and above. But I do think there was a lot more need for it back then, when you have a murderer and your jail system is so crappy that murderer can get out time and time again and time again and time again and just keep murdering. You know, and it's very important.
Blake's itching to say something.
Yes. No, I think Derek had a fantastic question about Victor rewriting the past, and Mike said it perfectly. And we have such a rich history in America, and I feel like one side really is just taught in many instances, and it's because people are not willing to judge those heroes. And they're, if you look at them by today's standards, and probably at that time, they weren't heroes. They're just people. They're people forging on. Like, well, is Rockefeller a hero? No, but he did a lot of like powerful things for this country. Henry Ford, was he a hero? Hell no, but he did a lot of powerful things. They're not heroes. We can judge them. Like they made changes in our country for the good. They made changes.
Ford is a hero. I disagree with Blake. Henry Ford is an absolute hero. Trying to remove heroes is upsetting to me.
They can be pioneers, but they don't have to be heroes. They just are parts of our history.
What is a pioneer?
And we don't. No, pioneers don't have to be heroes.
Please let him speak.
Yeah, a hero and a pioneer are two different things. A pioneer is somebody who's like trailblazing and making changes, but they sure can be a shitty person at the same time.
Do you have any
You
heroes?
admire
Historical
them.
heroes?
You admire them for their.
Does Blake have any heroes?
Oh man, heroes. I guess I'd have to think for a little bit. I don't have heroes that come to mind. Like I have people who've done good things, but like not somebody I judge as a hero. Like to me, a hero is such a just perfect term. I don't have heroes.
Well, I think that's part of the point.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for your responses to that question. I think at this point we'll move on to the audience questions. Please keep submitting your audience questions. We have 2 excellent questions. If we have more time to fill, I have some more ideas that I would like to throw out there just for the discussion of the panel. The first audience question comes from Mr. Griff Mogami. So, with the Calhoun name change, how far do we take it? Should we change the name? And more importantly, are we going to force business to change their name if it has Calhoun in it? Or make people change their name if they bear that family name? Ooh! They have already started to change the street names. They go even further? Question mark.
Good question. First off.
Yes.
Use me first.
Well, it can't be Ben first because he was first.
Ben just took it.
I'm sorry, I'm being a moderator.
That's all right. That's all right.
Not me either, right?
That's all right.
Sounds like you.
It's quite all right. It's quite all right. Mike, you go, then Boone, then Blake, then Ben.
I don't even know what Blake's going to say on this, but my own personal feeling is businesses can keep it. Like, that's the beauty of America. Like, those businesses, like, they're, it's irrelevant. It's a free country. But as far as public spaces, that was, we have elected officials that made this change. Then yes, if it's a public space, yes. Private, no. That's just my short answer.
Yeah, can I add to that? So these elected officials are voted on by that community. So that community, their officials are doing these changes, and we outside judge them, saying, you can't do that, that's wrong. But guess what? The people inside these communities are the ones enacting this change. So go for it. Do it all you want.
Boone, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, I don't want to change. Well, obviously, I don't want to change business names because I was against changing the name of the lake, period. So, I'm not one of those people who vote for that mayor of Minneapolis, I guess. I'm not even sure. Mm-hmm. But I'm guessing I don't get to. Yeah. So I'm not. I am on the outside going, that's stupid. I'm just heckling here, but no. And you know what, Mogani, they're just gonna come into your house and they are going to put cameras and microphones. And if they find you, you're going to the gulag. And I'll be right there waiting for you. We're gonna be the best buds.
I can't wait to
we're gonna drop that.
So, as somebody who works, I worked at a building called Calhoun Greenway.
Oh shit!
Like Calhoun, we did a name change.
There's the door.
We changed our name to Axon Green, and I was completely for this. And it's because Calhoun, for one, was never somebody that we ever admired. The name was only named for that because the Department of Natural Resources was run by Mr. Calhoun. It was brown nosing. He was never anybody to admire. Just pure brown nosing. We changed our name. Completely fine with that, but it's our free decision. It was our company's free decision to do that, right? Because we didn't want to be associated with, a guy who was absolutely for proposing slavery, right? It's names like George Washington and removing those names of like Washington Elementary School or Washington Street. That's what I personally have a big problem with because he did amazing things for this country. Despite, his flaws during his times, because he just wasn't able to fight that slavery fight, and that just wasn't within that historical context. And I think that's what we have to view and narrow in on is those sort of changes.
All right.
I didn't get that. I just added
Yes,
it.
please go ahead.
So, great question, Griff. You're fantastic. You're just a big, cute, bubbly guy. And so, I want to say changing people's family names, absolutely not. That's ridiculous. I hate your question. Okay, I'm just joking. So, there is something... So something very interesting in your question is about like businesses changing their names. We're kind of going through that right now. We have the Washington football team, which used to be the Washington Redskins, and it's interesting because it's not just it's a historical figure, quote unquote, that we're judging by today's standards that's still here today, and it was named then. It's continued to go on. And people judging it by today's standards said, you know what? This is offending too many people. They don't like it. It's insensitive. And they took the action to change it. And that's what should be done. So the right thing was done to change that name, which I think is like, if the Washington football team was the Redskins and died 60 years ago instead of living this whole time, it would have just been there then. But it made it this whole time, was changed. And I think it's fascinating and shows that we can still judge these historical figures today.
Well, the Washington Redskins isn't a historical figure; they're a modern football team.
Yeah, but they're from 60 years ago.
Yeah,
Okay,
they were
the
named.
next
60
audience
years ago.
question is from Mr. Bean.
Whoa! What the fuck?
Yeah, you heard it here first, folks. Seeing as social technology is always advancing, how do you reconcile essentially calling historical figures savages in terms of social technology? In addition, if social technology continues to progress, then all we can be is future savages. In this worldview, all that is and was is negative and backwards. Is this accurate? I'd like to present that to Mike and Blake first, who's more directed at them.
I can start. So I think it's fair, and honestly, I hate to think that I'll be judged as a savage and a backwards person by the future societies, but if I am, that means we're moving in the right direction, probably, right? Like Ben brought up abortion. I don't like abortion. I'm against it. But hopefully there is a society where they said, why did these dumb, reckless idiots like live in a way that it could even be a possibility? You know, we've fixed it so we don't even have to have abortions. I'm a fan of if 50 years from, if my grandchildren look at me and say, you know, he's a nice guy, but he sure did live backwards as a youngin'. Good. Then we're moving in the right direction.
Maybe in the Star Trek Next Generation kind of talked about this. They judged our monetary lifestyles and like we've bettered ourselves, and I think that's just great for society growth. So yeah, judge away.
Yep. I hope I'm a piece of shit to my grandkids.
Yeah, me too.
I think the greater point is like we should judge people by the good that they're trying to do for their times. Like, yes, during those times, a lot of bad things were happening, but they were trying to make the world a better place. And that's the way we should judge them, is were they trying to make the world a better place in the ways that they could? And that's the important point. That's, I think, what separates savages from innovators and pioneers, right? And that's like our point, is they're a hero because they were a pioneer, because they were trying to make the world a better place in their own historical context. And that's what we should be admiring about people, and that's what we should be judging them by. Were they trying to make the world a better place in their own time?
Mr. Greenlee, last thoughts before closing arguments.
I think Bean should have been in this debate. He is so good.
You're smart, we're not.
I agreed with everything you said, so I think, if I understood it all. It was big words.
It was big words.
Alrighty.
I don't even know what social technology means. I want him to explain that.
already had this debate.
At this point, we'll be moving to closing arguments. Would we like to go in a reverse order of opening statements, or does anyone have a preference for who goes
I
first?
think reverse sounds good.
Alrighty.
Yeah.
Are we starting now?
Yep, we're starting now.
All right.
You have 2 minutes to respond.
I just wanted to say, with my 2 minutes, I'm grateful for everyone online listening to this today. Hopefully, we opened your minds. Not even changed, but just opened your minds. And just want to say thank you to Derek for moderating, and thank you to all the debaters as well. But yeah, I just want to say, I think again we all agree, and I want to emphasize that we all want like history to be known, and facts to be there, and our kids to know these facts. And that's the difference is how do we get there? And Blake and I on our side think we have the better way, and I hope you agree too that judging others constantly, and whenever you judge someone, you're bringing highlights to things, and I feel like that's how you get things. Otherwise, if not, it gets erased in history. And yeah, I wish I didn't have 2 beers because this would be easier.
Well, you did great. You did great.
But yeah.
Alrighty, next up.
Is it me? Yeah, I wasn't sure. So yeah, I think it comes down to when you choose to vote here, if deciding if you're for or against the motion to stop judging historical figures by today's standards. I think it comes down to if you believe and agree with me that this judgment leads to the erasal of history over time. Which I believe it does. Hopefully I persuaded you to think that way. I don't know. So, yeah, I don't have anything else good. Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Rustad, your closing statement.
So I think this judging and evidence gathering is a healthy thing to do. I think you can separate the good and the bad. You can appreciate. So Ben brought up, is this person making the world a better place? That's a great thing to look at, and you can be proud of that. But did they make the world a worse place in other avenues? And if they did, I think you should be aware of that and acknowledge it. I don't think you should just brush it under the rug. So I think it is healthy to judge our historical figures and not hold them as deities and gods, but to really, say, would I be happy with this person if he were here today? If he's not, if you're not happy, then good. Know that. Be aware of that. So I want to take it really far back now. I think you'll vote for my side after thinking about it this way. When caveman invented fire, we can be happy he invented fire, but we know for the rest of his life, he's not some hero that we strive to be like. He's just a goddamn caveman.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Rustad. Ben Rick, you have the final word.
The man who made fire is a hero. Don't vote for the side who doesn't want any heroes.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, what Boone was saying, I think it is important to vote for that caveman and to vote for us caveman on our side. Because, at the end of the day, we do have to look at that historical context and whether they were making positive changes for the good or not, and what they were doing in their time to make those positive changes, and how they were making the world a better place. If that person were brought into the modern era, they probably would act different, right? Because of those times, because of how they were born and how they were raised. And those are important things to take into account as to what shaped and made them a human being. And we need to look at that when we're diving down and judging these people. And we're not talking about not viewing the bad things that were done. We're talking about those things, but also admiring the good and wonderful things and the innovations and the pioneerings that they did during their time and how they made the world a better place. And that's how we should view these historical characters and figures. And if that's what you believe, how we should view people in the context of their times, that's why you should be voting for our side, because that context does matter and that does affect how they made their decisions and how they chose to live in this world. And that's what I had to say.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Rippey. Okay, at this point, this is the next stage of the voting. Mr. Michael has posted the post-debate voting sheet. We will be taking a 10-minute break on our end. We would like all of the audience members to please click on the link posted in Discord and fill out the section post-debate. We will use this to tabulate the winner of the debate. Whoever changes the most minds will be the winner, not necessarily who has the most votes. Thank you very much for coming to this debate, and we'll talk to you after a brief pause. Thank you very much. Welcome back, everyone. We have tabulated the results. I can assure you that this has been the most secure voting situation in all of history, and there is a 0% chance of voter fraud in our debates. Mr. Michael Heidelberger, would you please read the results out for everyone aloud?
Okay, so pre-debate votes are, and again, the motion was stop judging historical figures by today's standards. 66.7% of people agreed with that motion. 33% of people disagreed with the motion. Post-debate was a split, 50-50. So, going from that math,
we lost.
Yeah. The people for the emotion have lost the debate. You can't see this right now, but we're flicking out the other team.
I am happy that Mike is a three-time
reigning fucking champion! That's how you do it! I can't be me!
Is this where we end?
Hold on. We have some post-election day ballots. That just came in.
Stop the count!
I won the election!
Mr. Mike, would you refresh the post-debate?
No way!
Really?
I'll do it. Happening?
This is happening.
Was this ballot submitted on election day?
I'm looking.
Put the postmark on it.
There is an update.
Okay.
It's the same though. Stop judging. Yeah, it's still. So now it's as same as pre-debate. So 66% agree, 33% disagree.
So we didn't change any minds.
No minds were changed during this debate.
This was an excellent debate, everyone.
Maybe we flipped two people.
Oh,
Maybe.
that's
Maybe we
a better
changed
way to
minds.
look at
Oh,
it.
did you have a maybe or undecided?
I didn't. I should have. Oh, I screwed up.
Stop the count.
Oh, you didn't even give them that
Edit
chance.
that out. Edit that part out. We had an excellent debate here, everyone. We have an argument of the month first. This is our first ever try. Thank you for listening in online and for all of our audience who came in person. We would like to just
Cut that part.
We'd like to give our wholehearted thanks for your attention and support, and we wish you the best. Coming here live from St. Paul, Minnesota. Argument of the month, November, episode ending.
Oh,
now.
sponsors.
Sponsored by
Hands down.
Doo-Doos
No,
of
hands
South
down.
St. Paul.
Hands down.
Sponsored by Doo-Dudes. Whenever your dog shits all over the place, Doo-Dudes will do the duty for you. Also sponsored by Hands Down, the only thing that has been scientifically proven to protect you from the coronavirus, made right here in good old St. Paul, Minnesota. I think at this point that's all, folks. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a great rest of your lives. We'll see you next month.
There's gonna be a huge pain in the butt to edit that.